Hey Chael, Glenn Bell. First of all, congratulations on over 1 million subscribers. Now to my questions. I have a question about a fight that took place in 1996. It was UFC 11. Point 5, the ultimate. There was a fight between Cal Worsham and a street fighter that the adults call Tank Abbott. In this fight, Tank had Cal up close to being out of the octagon. I mean, it was close. He had him up real high, almost throwing him out of the octagon. First question, have you ever seen anybody come closer to throwing somebody out of the octagon than Tank Abbott did that night? And don't get me wrong, Chael. The last thing I wanted to see was a grown man get thrown out of the octagon to be hurt. And don't get me wrong, Chael. The first thing I wanted to see was a grown man getting thrown out of the octagon, but not to get hurt. But that was an exciting moment. So have you ever seen anyone else get closer than that? I'm assuming nobody actually got thrown out because I probably would have heard about it. But has anyone ever been closer to being thrown out as Cal was? Second question, what would have happened if he was thrown out? What would the rule have been? Would he have just dusted himself back off if possible, hop back into the octagon and continue fighting? By example, did the ref come in the locker room and say, listen guys, if you throw somebody out of the octagon, you immediately lose, fight's over? Or did he say, listen guys, if you throw an unwilling participant over that cage wall and into the seats, good job. You win.
Glenn Bell, what's happening, buddy? Nice to hear from you. I remember that night. I remember that fight. I know where I was. I was in Utah training. Tank Abbott actually prepared with us in the wrestling room. Mark Schultz was the head coach. Pedro Sauer was up the road. It was one of these things, but that's what Par Herrera and Tank Abbott did their training at. So I was very invested in this fight. Very invested in the ultimate. And what a great concept. And don't forget who Cal Worsham was. Cal Worsham is a UFC champion to this day. And what used to happen, Glenn, is it was an 8-man tournament. As a matter of fact, UFC 2 was a 16-man tournament. All done in one night. Royce Gracie, who won that, had to beat 4 men in one night. But generally, it was an 8-man tournament for the period of time and for those years where they did it. Well, Cal Worsham was an alternate fighter. He was in the back. So they played the tournament out. They're to the finals, which means 2 guys have fought 2 times. It means they're pretty worn down. They're a little beat up. They're a little tired. It's a lot to ask of anybody. The guy who was supposed to go into the finals can't make the walk, and I think that was Royce. I think it was actually Royce Gracie, and he had so much taken out of him in a fight that he didn't go on to the finals. That's how I remember it. That part isn't relevant. What's relevant is they bring Cal Worsham in. Well, now Cal is fighting for the world championship. Well, the UFC championship. Wasn't called a world title, but it's called the UFC championship. He's fighting for that in his first fight of the night. He's completely fresh. His opponent is not, and I think the opponent was Howard Harris at the time. Now, that's not the part that I'm trying to be the great student on and the great historian. I'm just the historian part. I think I've got that right. I think Royce pulled out. I think Howard Harris went to the finals. But when Cal came in, it was the championship match, and he was fresh. Now, that was a mistake. After that night, they had alternates fight. You would hold the tournament, then you'd hold an alternate fight. Those guys are all done unless they're to be inserted. It was as good as you could do. It's as good as anybody could think of. And you have to understand, Cal, very relevant. We fiercely adhere to the rules that we made up on the spot. It had to be that way. It was advertised to the world as no rules, no judges, no time limits. They meant to do that. Now, in the back, they told the boys, don't touch their eye and don't bite them. Anything else goes. Groin shots, completely legal. We saw a fight finished with that. Joe Son, right? Versus Keith Hackney. Grabbing the hair. Royce Gracie wrapped up Chemo's ponytail. Wrapped that ponytail and pulled it back and started hitting him. It's all legal. It was advertised as no rules, but you don't bite the guy and you don't touch his eyes. All right, great. It also was no time limit. That was true. When those fights started, when that card began, there was no time limits. Big John McCarthy was the referee. Now, when you're doing a pay-per-view, there's something called a window. Okay? TV talk, but you have a buy. You're open for a window. 7 p.m. to 10 p.m. You usually never hit 10 p.m., but if you do, you will go dark, which means you're off the air. So you got to get your show done. Ken Shamrock goes out to fight Royce Gracie. They get 20 minutes in and nothing's happening. I mean, there is nothing happening. Like, if we redo that 20 minutes, okay, we have 40 minutes of nothing happening. I'm only sharing when I say nothing's happening. No one was looking to strike. No one was looking to ground and pound. No one was looking to posture. Nobody was going for submissions. So there was no way to finish the fight. That fight is not going to end. Not at the rate that we're going. Oh, by the way, we're on television. Oh, by the way, we're going to go dark. So Big John, while calling the match, is trying to get instructions from the director. Everybody's right. That's what you had to do. So the promoter yells to Big John, we're going 30 minutes. So John's like, well, how long are we? 18 minutes. They got another 12. So John's trying to relay this information to the boys. And I want to say somewhere along the way that change, they were going to go 25 minutes, then they added another 5, but nobody complained. I might have even just added that part, but nobody complained. That's the way it was back then. First fight I ever lost was 7 minutes and 41 seconds into the fight that was scheduled for 7 minutes. I didn't complain. I'm not complaining now. That is literally the way it was done back then. We're just figuring out things as we go. The promoter of my fight that he liked even said that, no, the fight was so good, I let it keep going. I came from wrestling. I came from organized events. I would have never stood for that for wrestling. I don't know why I was okay with it in this situation, but this is what happened. So you cannot leave the ring. That's a boxing rule. But we take all of our cues from boxing. We still do to this day in large part. You cannot leave the ring. If a fighter's in there fighting and he leaves the ring, he's instantly disqualified. A corner man cannot be in the ring, by example, when a round starts. And there was somebody, it was a very meaningful fight, I want to say it was even Mike Tyson, where a corner man stayed in the ring. Now, he stayed in the ring because he wanted the fight stopped. He didn't want to throw in the towel. He wanted his fighter out of there. But the bell rang, the fight stopped. They stopped it, disqualified that, gave it to the other guy. The guy that was still in the ring, the corner man was like, oh my gosh, I didn't get out in time. I'm an old man. No, he meant to do it, but that's okay. That's within the rules. Now, the reason I bring that to you is there was no such rule for the UFC that if you leave the surface, no such rule. But I imagine there was one if Cal Worsham had willingly escaped the cage and crawled over and dropped down. I would imagine that Big John would have quickly disqualified him. And we would have definitely had a precedence to do that, known as boxing. I'm guessing right now. But I remember that moment, and I remember when Tank was trying to throw him out of the ring. And I remember thinking, he's going to win. If he throws him out, he'll win. And then you saw the way that Cal started to scramble. Like, if Cal was a willful participant at all, he'd have been out of that ring. Be like, I guess we're done. I don't know that John would have brought him back in and said, no, we're not. I don't know. But I remember that time. Now, don't forget, I'm 18 years old. Sport's brand new. Like you said, it was number 11. You only get a few fights a night, right? I've seen less than 50 of these things in my whole life. And I know that we're still learning the rule. We had no round system back then. You didn't have to wear gloves. There was no wrapping of the hands. There was no commissions. I mean, when I tell you that we just didn't have the rules, we just didn't have them. You don't know anything until you know it. And Glenn, you'll remember when they finally put a whole bunch of rules in. We'd already had how many fights, right? Now we've had well over 100 fights. When they finally put rules in, they put rules in that nobody had ever done anyway. This had never happened where somebody grabbed, it's called a small joint manipulation, grab one finger and break it. You have to grab 4 fingers, but nobody had ever grabbed 1 finger. Nobody had ever grabbed 2 fingers. So they just said you got to grab 4 fingers. I mean, just by example, they put a whole bunch of rules in that nobody was doing anyway. It kept the sport the exact same, but now you can present it different. They say, we aren't no rules. We have pages and pages of rules. It's good stuff. I'm not complaining about it. I'm sharing with you that we didn't know. Big John was in a different spot one time. Because, see, Big John would have been the one that had to call it. Don't forget the night that Carlos Newton and Matt Hughes both go down. John made that call on the spot. But I don't know that I believe that John had any training in that. I don't believe that John had ever seen that before. I don't believe that John was instructed by a commission. Now, he may have been. I'm sharing with you. I don't think that he was. I don't think it had ever happened. So they both went down. John made his ruling, and off we go. There was things like that John had to do. The Royce and Ken fight. Hey, we're going to go to a draw. We're going to have a TV time limit of 30 minutes. That was never advertised. In fact, we were directly and promised you that was not the case. It is now. Go. All right. You got to be able to do those things. There was a night Vitor Belfort versus Randy Couture, part 1. Randy is in the octagon. Vitor's not making us walk. They've played his music. They've given him his cues. Jon leaves the octagon and goes back to get Vitor. Vitor's, okay, I'm coming. Jon goes back to the octagon. Vitor doesn't come. Jon finally he goes back and gets him again. At this point, Randy had been in the ring almost 20 minutes. And don't forget, we're live. So now you got a production issue too. You're trying to explain the story. You're trying to tell, you don't know what's going to happen. Jon went in the back and said, you have 2 minutes to be in the ring or I'm disqualifying you. And Jon would have had the authority to do that. Jon was the authoritative body. The same as he remains today, except today it can be questioned. There's group thought. There was no group thought back then. We had one guy that understood the rules and was good enough to enforce them and have the respect of the athletes, the promoter, and the media, and it was Big John McCarthy. So I'm telling you, he could have disqualified Vitor. That would have held. That would be on the books today. So you're asking me, what would have happened if Tank would have thrown in Cal out of the ring? I know at the time I watched that, at 18 years old, that I thought that the fight would be over. I just didn't know if Tank would have won because Cal has left the ring, or if we were going to defer to the NWA rules, which, if you'll recall, you cannot throw your opponent over the top rope. So perhaps Tank would have been disqualified. I don't know. But that's, at that time, what I thought was going to happen. At least the fight was going to come to a conclusion. I hate MMA in a ring. Boxing ring. I despise it. Now, I fought him a whole bunch of times. I couldn't possibly care less. I don't care if a guy's southpaw or orthodox. I don't know the difference. I couldn't tell you one opponent was southpaw or orthodox. Before fighting him, after fight, I have no idea what the difference of that is. But people tell me that there is, and people tell me there's a difference when you're at a cage versus a ring. I don't dispute those. I don't know what it is. Reason I hate rings. Bodog fight, I was in Russia. Dude from Canada was fighting with a American. And they went onto the top rope. Guy was really tall. He's like 6'6". So when they hit the top rope, he just went head over tea kettle. Well, he didn't make it all the way out of the ring, and the opponent's on top of him. So the rod, right? You think those are ropes? That's metal wire, just so you understand, wrapped in plastic. So that is now, it's cutting the man in half. He's 215 pounds, but he's got another 215 pounds on top of him. And that one rod is going right through the middle of his back. And I watched his body bend. It was oh my goodness, I was scared. It was a terrifying thing. And he let out a moan like I have never to this day, prior or since, and I've never heard a human make this sound. And it was an absolute agony combined with fear. He also thought his body was about to be cut in half. And I thought that one example would ban rings forever. Hell no, they still bring out the ring to this day. That example didn't mean anything. So what, the guy almost got cut. I don't understand. I don't know why you would do a ring. I don't like it. I don't think MMA should be done in a ring. I'm only sharing that with you, and I only have that opinion because I watched this guy almost get cut in half. It was very, very terrifying. So you asked if I've ever seen anybody before or since being thrown over. No, I haven't, and even that was an accident. They busted into the ring. They thought I was going to hold him up. The guy was so tall with his leverage. I mean, it's just one of those things. Just about over he went. But it would not be good. I have seen people leave a ring. That, of course, was by choice. Saw Manny Pacquiao, half of his body, leave a ring, but that was because Manuel Marquez Jr. juiced out of his mind, knocked him out of the ring. I don't know what would have happened. But I do believe we'd have to ask Big John. But then another question is, how would Jon handle it to this day? It's, no, Jon, how would have you handled it then? 1996. I think, whether it was a win or a disqualification, but I do think it would have stopped the fight.